Betting on sports can be hard, but hiring Morgan & Morgan is easy. Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury firm. They have over 100 offices nationwide and more than 1,000 lawyers. Their fee is free until they win. Find out more information at forthepeople.com/bestbets or dial #law, that is #529 from your cell phone, and that is FOR, thepeople.com/bestbets. This is a paid advertisement. A warmer from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Seeps with myself, Greg Eaps Peterson, now part of the Easton family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by Rob Donaldson, who does great work with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets. We're going to be chatting with him about what he's been noticing here in the start of conference play. We're going to be also diving in on what we've all been seeing in terms of some of these underdogs, the dynamic of handicapping these games just before New Year's, and some of the teams that he's starting to feel a little bit bullish/bearish on in the final segment. Going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Monday as we hit some bank shots. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GNN_D1. Keep in mind, large CM, the mean does not matter. So, as per usual, please send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, but we had a fun day of college basketball on Sunday. Let's take a look back at it. Try to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Not a ton of ranked teams that were in action on Sunday, but you did have a few power conference teams like Texas, who was able to get the job done against Northwestern State. Not quite enough to be able to cover that number of about a 27.5. They win by a kind of 77-53 as Northwestern State has really been slowing down their games, and they went just 3 of 17 from 3-point range. For Texas, they actually lost the turnover battle 10-5, but they won the rebound battle 42-26, and another nice performance on the glass from Arthur Colonna. Only 5 points, but 13 rebounds out of him. And Trey Johnson continuing his nice freshman season. He was able to supply the team with 18 points. The highest ranked team in Florida, they absolutely took it to Stetson. 85-45 Stetson in this game. They were catching in that neighborhood about 38.5 or so points. They were unable to cover, as Florida has been one of your best cover teams in all of college basketball thus far this season at 10-3 against the spread. For Stetson, they go 3 of 24 from 3-point range. And for Florida, they won the turnover battle 15-13. They won the rebound battle 49-36 as Elijah Martin was able to supply the team with 18 points. So really nice, convincing win out there. It's been a rough year for Quinnipiac. They've won one of your worst against the spread teams this far this season, but they got the job done 75-69. And that's a team that you do want to watch out for because they were dealing with an injury to Savion Lewis, their main facilitator. He had 7 assists and 1 turnover in this game, while Paul Otinho down low, 14 rebounds. So Quinnipiac, a nice triumph there. Illinois, they've been able to do a relatively rock-solid job of covering bigger numbers, and for this game, it was a larger number. They were laying about 39.5 on the close against Chicago State, and Operation Fade Chicago State appears to be back on like Donkey Kong, as man, they got bludgeoned in this game. About 117-64, as for Chicago State, they were able to go down to 31 from 3-point range, but Illinois just had everyone firing all cylinders. They go 15 of 33 from 3-point range. Tomislava Visic, 23 points. You had Kylan Boswell go for a triple-double, 18 points, 10 boards, 10 assists, and what's honestly been a little bit of a disappointing season for him, as it's been Kasparas Jakanuskis, who's really been the main man. He was able to have 14 points in this one, so sharing was very much carrying, as 3 guys for Illinois came in off the bench, had double figures, and then also out there in the Big Ten, Northwestern with a very good win over Northeastern. Northeastern has been able to cover some numbers this season as well, but 85-60, Northwestern is able to get the job done. A very nice win and cover for them, as for Northeastern, they go 9 of 22 from 3-point range, but they lost the turnover battle 22-6, and for this Northwestern team, Ty Berry, Brooks Barnizer combined for 45 points, and Barnizer throws in there 5 steals, 7 assists, 10 rebounds, so very dominant out there. We're starting to see Prairie View be able to cover a few games as well. They don't get the win against Oklahoma. This was an 89-67 final, but they certainly were able to cover the 29.5 as Tanaj Petaway was able to supply the team with 22 points. And Oklahoma has been a pretty solid cover team thus far this season as well, but I recall our good friend Justin Perry, who does great work over at Truck Hawaii Bets, talking about, hey, you might be wanting to check out the data a little bit more, as we should see a little bit of regression for Oklahoma. They did go just 5 of 17 from 3, but they did also shoot 60.5% 39.5% from the floor and went 32 of 35 at the free throw line, with Jalen Moore being able to give you more. He was able to supply the team with 22 points for Harvard and Iona. Not necessarily great against the spread starts of the season for either of these two teams, but it was coming out victorious Harvard in this one by a kind of 67-61. Final as for Iona, just not the same team that we have seen in past years. For Iona, just 3 of 18 from three-point range. DeJure Reeves at 25 points, and you did have 15 rebounds from James Patterson. It came with only 2 points attached to it, and for Harvard, they win this game despite playing even up on the boards, but they only had 8 offensive rebounds. Iona's 18. They lose that turnover battle 19-11, and somehow, some way they pull it out because they just shot it much better from the floor. So that was a little bit of an intriguing game. Minnesota's been certainly one of your worst against the spread teams in all of college basketball. And on the close, a lot of places had Morgan State at a plus 22.5. So the misery continues for Minnesota, officially 1-10-2 against the spread in most places. Some places might have this as 2-9-2 against the spread, but 90-68. They do get the win over Morgan State, so they do stop the bleeding there. Mike Mitchell, he's back in the fold for the team. He went 6 of 8 from 3, 22 points. Saucy Garcia, 18 points, 8 boards, so very nice signs there. And for Morgan State, they did have just 6 turnovers in this game, but Minnesota only had 5 themselves, and Cameron Hobbs was able to supply that Morgan State team with 25 points. Another one of these teams that had high expectations coming into the year that has sort of flopped with regards to mid-major ranks, that'd be High Point. They were a little bit of a low point on Sunday. Norfolk State goes on the road as 8.5-point dogs. They get the job done 77-74. This despite the fact that High Point went 15 out of 36 from 3. We've been wondering if Chase Johnson, who had 31 points opening night, 11 points or fewer in every game ever since it was going to emerge. He did go 8 of 13 from 3 with 24 points. And then Jocelyn Bodu, Kamani Hamilton, they combined for 32 rebounds, 21 points. But for Norfolk State, Brian Moore has been giving you more all season long. 33 big points in this one. Norfolk State, they win this game despite shooting just 5 of 15 from 3-point range, but won that turnover battle by a count of 12-8. So very nice triumph for them. It has been interesting what we've been seeing in terms of the underdogs in conference play, as a lot of them have been barking, especially in the Rison Lake on Sunday. One that was not able to bark, the Fighting Doug Gottliebs, as man, that has been a less than tremendous situation. And for UW Green Bay, they lose. They do not cover against Fort Wayne, 83-67 the final. And for Fort Wayne, it's been a little bit of an up and down season for them, but they're 8-5 against the spread. UW Green Bay currently 5-10 against the spread. And for UW Green Bay, right now they're dealing with an injury to their top scorer, Anthony Roy. So that's not a place where you want to be. But in terms of those underdogs, this was a team that they were an underdog on the start. Some places closed them as a little bit of a favorite, but you did see Robert Morris get the job done in 3 overtimes against Northern Kentucky, 97-93. As for Robert Morris, they win this game despite going 7 of 33 from 3-point range and 20 out of 32 at the free throw line. But Northern Kentucky, 19 out of 30 at the charity stripe, and they lost the turnover battle. Northern Kentucky did 23-13. That was a harebrained game. IU Indy as a double-figure underdog, able to cover against UW Milwaukee, 88-81, and IU Indy now 8-5 against the spread. Detroit is now 10-4 against the spread. They were an underdog against Youngstown State. Looked like things might get away from them early, as they got down very big in this game. As a matter of fact, for Youngstown State, at one point they got up by a count of, I believe it was like 20-3, actually 23-5 at one point. But Detroit, they're able to cling on for dear life, 73-64 final in that one. And for Robert Morris, they're now 9-4 against the spread. So really stands UW Green Bay and the 4-9 against the spread Northern Kentucky team. These teams have been able to do a nice job of being able to make you some money on Cleveland State. They were a little bit of a home underdog in a lot of places against Wright State as well. They closed as about a 1.5-point favorite, but they got the job done 78-64 out there as well. So going to be a lot of fun to take a look at conference play. And this is one where, with Western Kentucky, they were one of your best against the spread teams in all of college basketball entering into the day against Michigan. Then they gave up north of 100 to Michigan. So now Western Kentucky 7-2-3 against the spread. Michigan got to the 100-point plateau with about 5 minutes remaining in the second half and went 19 of 38 from 3-point range in the first 35 minutes of the game. Just absolutely took it to Western Kentucky. Every single starter for Michigan was able to score in double figures. Heck, you had Sam Walters off the bench, be able to supply double figures. Just a very good performance there from Michigan. And then we saw Ohio State be able to put up 100 points themselves in the Big Ten, 103-83. They take down Indiana State. They're able to cover that number of 17.5. As for Indiana State, it's been a little bit of a less than tremendous season for them as well. But they did have off the bench Jaden Daughtry be able to supply the team with 25 points. But For Iowa State, Bruce Sorten was able to give the team 13 points. Aaron Bradshaw's back with the team. He saw 13 points in 18 minutes, so that's a good sign for Iowa State. And they got 41 free throws at the line themselves, so that's something that you do like to see if you're them. Stonehill has been surprisingly a really good against the spread team thus far this season. They get the win in overtime against Lafayette, this by a count of 70-65 for Stonehill. They've been a little bit up and down with that regard, but they were able to get the cover in this game as they were a 4.5-point underdog, so they win that game outright. As Caleb Williams for Lafayette, he was able to supply the team with 15 points, but Patriot League as a whole has been a little bit of a, shall we say, a rough team against the spread. As for Lafayette, right now they're 7-6 against the spread, but we just have seen these teams like Colgate and company not be what they have been in past years. So Bucknell now 8-4-1 against the spread themselves, so we'll give a little bit of credit where it is due for them. A little bit of credit where it is due for this Patriot League team as well. As American played a double overtime game against UMBC, and UMBC got the job done by a count of 96-93. That's another underdog that was able to cash for you on Sunday. And Oregon, they did get the job done as a big favorite against Weber State, 89-49. Final in this one for Weber State. Been a less than savory year for them. They go 3 of 22 from three-point range. And for Oregon, 9 of 22 from distance. Not necessarily one-star player. Jackson Shellstead was able to give you 16 points, but they won that turnover battle 18-11. They won the rebound battle 40-28. So just a nice, well-rounded performance out of them. And that's been another nice surprise out there as well. As Oregon now against the spread this far this season. Not quite where Ohio State is. I think that a lot of people would be surprised to know Ohio State right now 9-4 against the spread this season, but Oregon, they're right now 8-5 against the spread this far this season as well, so they've been able to do a pretty rock solid job with that regard. Mississippi Valley State, they wish they were 8-5 against the spread. They lose to LSU 110-45. I remember writing up the under thinking, well, we're going to get like 40-45 points out of Mississippi Valley State, just have to hold to 100, and they couldn't even do that as LSU shoots 65.5% from the floor. LSU had Cam Carter have 16 points in like the first 16 minutes of this game. Off the bench, you were able to get Victorious Miller going for 20 points, and for Mississippi Valley State, they had 18 made field goals and 17 turnovers. Just absolute sadness out there. And for Purdue, they're now 5-8 against the spread. Win but non-cover against Toledo. This by a count of 83-64. This is not quite the same Toledo team that we've seen in past years, by the way. As for Toledo, just 2 of 14 from 3-point. She did an okay job inside, and Drake Hoffman run. He was solid inside. He had 23 points, and Braden Smith 34 points, 12 assists. He clearly is a nice player for Purdue. We'll see what we're going to be able to get out of them moving forward as well. And if you're looking at some of the demonstrative teams with regards to totals as well, we saw some interesting Missouri Valley Conference action as well, and these have been some of the more, shall we say, intriguing teams with regards to the total thus far this season. As for Evansville, they get the job done against Missouri State by a count of 57-40. Evansville now 9 unders to 3 overs thus far this season, and for Missouri State, they couldn't hit the broadside of barn in this one. 5 of 25 for 3-point range. By the way, out there in the Missouri Valley Conference, getting back to Indiana State, 10 overs to 1 under thus far this season. Bradley, 9 overs to 3 unders thus far this season. As for the Braves of Bradley, they do get the job done on Sunday as they are able to give a 81-75 double overtime win over Valparaiso. Certainly not enough for a cover, as Valparaiso was a 14.5-point underdog, but Bradley, number 1 team in all of college basketball in terms of 3-point shooting percentage, took a dip in this one at 7-25 from the outside, but Duke Dean along to Arias Hanna combined for 41 points. That was enough to be able to get it done here. Belmont has been a great over team. They're at 9 overs to 3 unders, but Drake held them to 46 points. Drake has been a great under team. 7 unders to 3 overs, 65-46 for Belmont. They had 16 turnovers in this game. They love to play up and down. They could get no tempo in this game whatsoever, and Bennett Sturts, 20 points. Drake, 12-0. Rank these guys, committee, because, man, it has been impressive what we've been seeing out there. And for Northern Iowa, it's been pretty impressive what we've been seeing out of them. They were laying about 10.5 points, just barely cover that number against Southern Illinois. You became a little bit hairier than what you'd like, as Southern Illinois actually closed the game on a 25-5 run or something like that. They were down 73-46, so actually a 21-5 run, but so for this Northern Iowa team, been one of the better 3-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. 7 of 17 from 3-point range in this one. Jacob Hudson had 20 points, and Titan Anderson tightened up with a double-double. 15 points, 10 rebounds. So that was fun and exciting. And then Illinois State, they've been a better over team as well. Not able to get there in this one, though, against UIC, 73-67. UIC able to get the job done out there. And then we also did see in the late window as well what we've been seeing with North Carolina. A rough first half, and then they're able to regroup in the second half. Wasn't quite enough to be able to cover the number against Campbell because Campbell was catching about 28.5 points. But for North Carolina, they were laying about 17 in the first half, only won that first half by 11. In the end, they are able to get the job done as RJ Davis has 23 points. But again, hasn't shot it well from three. Looked much better in this game, shooting 5 of 9 from three-point range. But still a few concerns out there for North Carolina. You were able to get a pretty easy over as North Carolina has been one of those teams that have been hitting a whole bunch of overs thus far this season. As now they're up to 9 overs to 4 unders thus far this season. And if you're looking trend-wise at where we're getting in college basketball, we have been noticing some overwhelming action over the last 7 days. As in the last 7 days, the over rate is right around about 54 or so percent, 47 overs to 39 unders. Meanwhile, the favorites have been having a really rough time of it. Underdogs over the last 7 days, 52-34-1 against the spread. If you're looking at the season to date, it has been an underdog season, 1,065, 1,007, and 30 against the spread. That's really a 51.5% hit rate. Meanwhile, overs hitting at about 50.5%, 1,048 overs, 1,023 unders. So that's where we're seeing college basketball right now, and that's what we all got on Sunday. Now let's take a look at Monday's games. Let's take a look at conference play and so much more with Rob Donaldson, who does great work over at the Rob's Best Bet Show. On the flip side, you're on Just Get Seats with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Houston Family Podcast. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Just Get Seats with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Houston Family Podcast. And it is always a pleasure to be joined by this man as we've got Rob Donaldson aboard. He does such great work with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets. They get a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. He's dialed in on a little bit of everything. NFL, college basketball. I know that he's doing a great job on the college football front as well. And you're able to follow him on Twitter/X at RobDFB altogether. And Rob, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Greg. And the last time that we were together, I think we were talking about no games. We were just talking about, concepts and in theory. But, we got college basketball Saturday, college football Saturday, whatever your cup of tea is, it's happening again because the holidays are kind of moving past that point, and that just means more fun for us.
And for the next 2 months, we are going to be getting north of 125 college basketball games on every single one of these Saturdays. That is going to be absolutely tremendous. And just how do you take a look at this time of year? Because we do have a lot of teams that are coming off of very long breaks. We've got some teams that are starting to wrap up their non-conference slates. Some of these teams are already in their conference slates as well. And I think that it's just an interesting crossroads because you've got just a whole bunch of different angles and a whole bunch of different matchups in general when it comes to these next few days.
Yeah, and one of the things I would say, especially this time of year when you are getting these monster slates, and certainly we aren't new to this scene of college basketball where every single game gets just thrown on a Saturday and then all of a sudden you're picking and scheming against 200 games, but I would kind of tend to avoid, if you can, kind of the high-profile matchups. I think the biggest thing that people get sucked into is wanting to bet, the Gonzaga-UCLA game because it's the game of Saturday. But sometimes that can be the biggest detriment to your success as a bettor just because that game is so heavily bet. That line is going to be the sharpest, and when you have so many mid-majors in action, there's probably a lot of value you can extract from those types of teams.
Yep, I am right there with you. I do think that there's a lot of value when it comes to some of these lesser conferences, and let's call it what it is. The bookmakers, they have to put out a line on every single game, and I think that they're a little bit more concerned about getting correct the big-time football game for insert your favorite Saturday/Sunday here. They're much more concerned about getting correct the high-profile Big 12 ranked top 10 team matchup here rather than, say, that Southland matchup between Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin and Southeast Louisiana or something like that. And I do think that there's a lot of credence with that as well because even though these games might not necessarily be the games where you're huddled around the TV for, they might not be the games that are on ESPN 8, the Ocho, or anything like that, you're able to take a look at them, and money is money at the end of the day.
And what we kind of tend to see, especially when it comes to games that are being replayed, from past seasons on a mid-major level, is you're going to see a lot of recycled lines. Like, for example, there's a number of different lines in the mid-major ranks, like McNeese versus New Orleans, or, just kind of skimping through all the field. And all they're really doing in terms of setting the line is looking at last year's result and then adding a hook is kind of what it feels like. And for that reason, we know that these teams change. The books aren't going to really look at it from that human level. And for that reason, I think we have such an edge, scoping out those lines. Heck, even DePaul was kind of laying a number against Loyola, Maryland that kind of felt like an old historical DePaul line from the past 10 years. But this is a much improved DePaul team, and I feel like that's getting discredited right now.
And I think that that's so interesting that you bring up DePaul, and I'm glad that you do. As Rob Donaldson, who does a great job with the Rob's Best Bet show, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And how much do you want to take a look at a team like DePaul that I think that this is the way that I'm looking at them right now. In these step-up games, they've come up small, but against the lesser opponents, they've been able to really beat up on them. And I do feel like there are some teams out there that they're sort of in that vector of when they do step up, when they are in a big game, they're just not a team that you necessarily want too much of a part of, but when they're playing a lesser team like they were on Saturday against Loyola, Maryland, those are good hammer spots.
Well, what's interesting, and I'll put DePaul and to some degree Georgetown in kind of the same category because, well, obviously, they're both high major teams. They're both kind of going through last couple of years, last 5 years, they've been really at the bottom of their league, and now they're having a little bit of a rise, so to speak, to some varying degrees. I will say with every single team like that, there is going to be a buy point where you might have missed the boat, if you're getting on them too late. And at the same time, when they are, kind of trading off these wins where they have a big time loss against a big time opponent, but then they're stomping these little kind of smaller, lesser opponents, I feel like that's still in the buy range for this team. So with DePaul, I'm looking to back them as much as I can because I still think they're getting stale lines. I think they're much improved, and it's just going to take a nice little stretch in the Big East, maybe pulling off a major upset to really kind of turn the tide on their narrative.
Yeah, but it's going to be so interesting to see what they do because Georgetown is one of those teams that I'm starting to buy into as well. I'm buying Georgetown, honestly, a little bit more than DePaul just because I really like the way that they're playing defense, and that's one of the characteristics I do like to see out of a team because we know that three-point shooting is going to come and go. It does feel like DePaul relies a little bit too much on the three ball, whereas with Georgetown, they haven't necessarily been a great three-point shooting team by a stretch of the imagination. They're just doing a rock-solid job down low, and they're doing a nice job of not letting you be able to put up easy buckets.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you on Georgetown. I mean, when you have Ed Cooley, and, I'll even go as far as to say that I think Ed Cooley is arguably, a top 4 coach in this league, and it's kind of splitting hairs when you get to that 4-5 line between a number of different names, but I think Ed Cooley is one of those guys who's always done more with less. He's able to attract athletes. He's able to utilize them to the best of the ability. And when you look at Georgetown and their talent accumulation over the years, they've never had issues bringing in athletic guards, athletic big men, and just overall, kind of raw, moldable pieces. They just were never molded, and they kind of landed flat. Well, now they're 11-2. They're looking like one of the better teams in the Big East, and they're not being labeled as such. I feel like this is a top 5 finisher, and I'm going to be riding them until I can't anymore.
Yeah, but with Georgetown, I do think that there's still a really good buy point with them as well. We saw them get the job done against Creighton. That non-cover against Seton Hall was relatively brutal, but still, all in all, this has been a good team this far this season. As a man that does a good job of being able to break things down is Rob Donaldson. He's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And when it comes to the dynamic of conference play, we certainly saw that on Saturday with the Mountain West underdogs being able to come through. How much do you just take a look at these things being just a little bit more, shall we say, situational, and how much do you think that things do tighten up a little bit more in conference play? Because I do think that especially early on, underdogs are your friend with these teams coming off of a long break. I think that that's a good elixir for a lot of these underdogs because I think that with the way that college kids are, these are 18 to 22-year-olds, they get a little bit distracted this time of year. I think that that's a good way for some of these underdogs that might be a little bit hungry or that might have been a little bit disrespected in, shall we say, non-conference play to be able to rise up and to be able to give good charge.
Well, what I will say about conference play, and we've talked about this a number of different times, but the college basketball season kind of moves in chapters where we're going to have different outlooks on, different parts of the year. And right now, when we're entering into conference play, I think the biggest point of entry is look at the teams with some really bad-looking records and apply some context to them, and you can find some really great buy points. And I know we've mentioned buy points a few different times, but you look at every single conference, there's a team that's maybe hovering around 500, maybe a tick above, maybe a tick below, and there's a potential really solid buy point for that team entering into conference play because yes, there is that familiarity. Maybe they're getting healthier. Maybe they just suffered some kind of unfortunate or random losses in the early going that can be straightened out as the season progresses. Man, to your point, we're seeing, these crazy conference matchups that have a lot of excitement games, but don't get caught up in just the exciting ones, because there are some blowouts in conference play that should be warranted, and you just got to be able to pick your spots when it comes to that sort of thing.
Yep, absolutely. There are some of these teams that you don't want to be trusting in too much, because I do feel like some of these teams that have been historically really good are just not stepping up this year. Like with conference play, we were just talking about a second ago, that Colorado State team is one that I faded on Saturday just because I love Nico Medved as a coach. I love what Colorado State has done over the last few years. It just feels like it's a little bit of a different team this year. I've been feeling that way about Vermont out there out east. Colgate is one of those teams that feels like they've taken a fall off as well. How much have you noticed that? Because I've noticed quite a few mid-majors that perennially are just really good, just have not been on that same level this year.
Yeah, mid-majors, and heck, even if you look at a conference like the ACC, for example, right? I mean, if you flash back 7 years ago, you were really amped up and excited to back Miami, Virginia Tech, Notre Dame, UNC, Virginia. And now it's like, I don't want anything to do with any of those teams. And so that's kind of, to your point, some of these historical trends that we've been seeing with conference realignment, with the portal, with NIL, with coaches retiring like Jimmy Larrañaga this past week.
All those coaches that have retired, by the way, most of those are in the ACC.
It's crazy. Roy Williams, Tony Bennett, Bray, Boeheim. Yes, Coach K, and Jimmy Larrañaga now. It's crazy. It's a mass exodus of that conference. And I think it is obviously the product that I think is suffering as well, even with some additions of like a Pat Kelsey in there, for example. But yeah, to your point, when you're looking at the mid-major ranks too, there are a number of really great universities that in past years I would have just backed and called it, a culture bet. Like, say, a UC Santa Barbara, for example, pops up where they're just not really showing up to the table. And that's across the board in every single league right now. I don't really know how much I want to measure that out the gate for these mid-majors, especially at that level where I think the NIL is so tight just between the different teams and different programs. But it's certainly something to monitor as the season goes on here.
Yeah, I feel like the ACC has really suffered on both the football front and the college basketball front because, to your point, I feel like the conferences that have had the best, shall we say, starts this far this season are the conferences that have done a great job of hiring in the last few years. Like the SEC is always hiring on that top flight mid-major coach. They're always doing a good job being able to get those big names. While the ACC, they were relying upon the legends for so long. These guys have moved on and they've either hired in-house or they really haven't gone for it in terms of the hiring cycle. And I think that that's been the biggest detriment to the ACC. While a conference like the Big Ten has a bunch of schools that have stayed stagnant with regards to their coaches. And as a result, they're not really rising up the board, but they're not really falling down the board in terms of the hierarchy of conferences either.
Yeah, and I think when you're at that high major level, there is such a pressure from the athletic departments to hire the safe choice, the quote-unquote safe choice as the head coach. And sometimes that just leads to head coach purgatory where your program suffers for 4+ years because you wanted to be safe with it and pick the alma mater guy or pick the guy who coached under the legend you're trying to replace. Whereas, like, you look at the Mountain West, that's a conference that I really love because it's right on the cusp of that high major level and kind of the higher mid-major tier. And so they hire from, those conferences like the Big South and the Horizon League, and they go for it and say, you know what, listen, we're going to hire the upside guy because our conference needs that to get in the tournament. And that's where I feel like the success has come from in recent years.
Yep, and let me throw out there this conference as well as Rob Donaldson, who does great work with the Rob's Best Bet Show, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. What have you made of Conference USA this year? Because I feel like that's a conference that deserves a lot more love. Not really going to be seeing a lot of them until later on in the week, until the turn of the new year. But Middle Tennessee was able to give charge to Tennessee. Western Kentucky is the team that has represented the conference in the NCAA tournament most recently. They've had a nice start. Liberty is 12-1. Louisiana Tech is 11-2. UTEP is off to a nice start. I look at this entire conference and I've been very impressed by darn near all of these teams, sans Florida International.
100%. And even UTEP in their 3 losses, they've dealt with some injuries that have kind of hindered them, but that's a really great team that almost won to Louisville and won. And on top of that, Kennesaw State, they beat Rutgers at their home gym just this season as well. And so if you want to talk about the environments, if you want to talk about quality teams, Conference USA has it despite, having so many kind of, I guess, team changes over the past few years. They've adopted some teams from the AA Sun. They've lost some teams to the American, and it kind of feels like they're settling into what they have. But what they have are a lot of quality programs. It's not a massive conference, so all these teams are going to play each other, and it's going to lead to some really exciting basketball and potentially some really tough betting lines. But just from an overall talent standpoint and performance, it can't be denied.
No, it cannot be denied, and I do think that that's going to be a fun one to take a look at moving forward as Rob Donaldson, who does such great work with the Rob's Best Bet Show. He's joining me on Cuss Hoops, and we're doing this ahead of the Monday action, and we do have those SEC teams going through their last non-conference games, like Arkansas is going to be playing Oakland, Auburn is going to be playing Monmouth, and you're going to see a lot of, shall we say, larger numbers. How do you take a look at these sorts of situations? Because I do think that when we get into conference play, we get our bearings a little bit more, but I always think that these last non-conference games are a little bit tricky, and especially with a lot of these teams playing their first, perhaps their second game coming off a break, I do think that it could be some sleepy spots for some of these bigger time favorites, whereas a team like a Monmouth going up against Auburn, you're probably going to be able to catch 100 billion points with them, and for Monmouth, this is going to be their Super Bowl.
Yeah, and to your point, we saw a few different ones already here on Saturday right out the gate with Maryland Eastern Shore competing against Maryland at home, and that was a crazy one because Maryland Eastern Shore is arguably the worst team in college basketball. Maryland's been stomping teams.
Hey, Mississippi Valley State takes offense to that. They are by far the worst team in all of college basketball. We all know it.
You are so right. You are so right with that. And I do apologize to UMEC or UMES. And then when you also look at one of the other games, Eastern Kentucky, right? They win to Louisville and they should have beat Louisville, lost in the last 8 seconds of that ball game. And there were a number of different teams. Bucknell kind of took it to Syracuse earlier on. I do feel like, to your point, there's going to be a lot of sleepy spots with these high majors laying these hefty numbers, and don't be afraid to take those points and just plug your nose, close your eyes, hit okay, accept bet, and then let it ride and make some money on the back end.
Absolutely, and I do think that that's going to be a lot of fun to take a look at the next few days because we've only got a few more opportunities until we're full on in conference play, and it doesn't matter whether it's conference play, if it's non-conference play, or heck, if it's the offseason. Rob, I know you're always looking at college basketball, you're always looking for edges, and you do a great job of being able to find them. Let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Well, hey, Greg, always enjoy hopping on and talk ball with you. And for those who are wanting to follow my bets on a nightly basis or just throw questions my way, you can do so on Twitter/X at RobDFB and also on my YouTube channel, Rob Donaldson. And as always, Greg, I really appreciate you having me on.
And Rob does such an amazing job taking a look at this wonderful game of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, we all get a little bit smarter and did so once again today. So big thanks to Rob for joining me on Cuss Hoops, now part of the VC Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Cuss Hoops with myself, Craig Heaps Peterson, now part of the VC Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Rob Donaldson, who does such great work with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights. Did so once again today, so a big thanks to Rob for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Monday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at @unit_D1. Going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the larger conference games first, and then the extra games board involves teams from these conferences: the Southland, the Big South, the America East, the SWAC, the MEAC, if I haven't said so already, the Northeast Conference, and the America East. That should cover them also. How about if we do get things started with this first game, and this will be one that I write up, 851, 852. Utah Tech is on the road against Florida National. Florida National, a 5.5 point favorite. Total on this game is 147 after a 148. did set my total at 146. Florida National is a pretty up-tempo team, but they've actually been able to round into form with their defense. They're now in the top 110 nationally in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This is also a body clock game. This is a 9 o'clock a.m. Pacific, 10 o'clock a.m. Mountain Time game, and that's a big reason why I did write up Florida National laying the number. I did set them as a 10-point favorite for Florida National. Recognize that this is not a good team on the glass, but Utah Tech is outside the top 250 with regards to rebound rate as well. Samuel Ajaribi has been able to give you about 5.5 rebounds for Utah Tech, and Tennessee Rainwater has a little bit of versatility, and that's actually his name. His first name is Tennessee. His last name is Rainwater, giving you 8 points, 4 boards, shooting about 30% from 3. And for Utah Tech, they've looked a little bit more respectable ever since Beon Riley has returned. He missed 4 games due to injury. Returned in that game against South Dakota where he had 21 points, 14 rebounds, but don't think that lightning is going to be striking twice for this team. And you've had Noah Gonsalves be able to give you about 13.5 points per contest, but Florida National, a top 70 team in the country in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. And Jaden Brewer, in my opinion, is going to be the best player out there on the floor. 14.5 points, 5.5 boards, 3 assists for Florida National. They're still struggling with regards to rebounding, but they've gotten a little bit more help. Jonathan Ibar has been a little bit in and out of the fold, but Vinay Salusham, he's been able to give you about 9.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, and a little bit over 2 blocks per contest as well. Gentleman that comes in from the Cameroon for Florida National, leaving something to be desired from 3-point, shooting about 29% from the outside. But this has been a Utah Tech defense that has just been absolutely bludgeoned against D1 opponents because they played against the Whittier Poets earlier in the month. Yes, their mascot is actually the Poets. I'm not even kidding when I say that, but that said, against Division I teams this month, they have given up north of 80 points to all but one of them, 73 plus in every one of them. So I do think that Florida National going to do rock solid here. And for Florida National, they've now given up 72 or fewer in 3 of their last 4 games. Do you think that they get the job done in this spot in a body clock game for Utah Tech? So I'm going to be writing up Florida National, laying the number, and here at the 147 after 148 in on the under. 853, 854 on the betting board. Akron is on the road against Princeton. Princeton is a favorite of 6.5 points total on this game. It is 154. Set my line at 5.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Akron. Now, with Akron, it's been a massive fall off with regards to their defense. This is traditionally under John Gross, a team that does a really good job of being able to tee up. Typically, they're a top 75 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. 171st in the country in terms of points allowed per possession, but they're allowing 4 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're on the road rather than at home, and it's not as if this Princeton team has been anything to write home about on defense either. 180th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, allowing about 2 more points per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than when they're on the road as well. And this is still a Princeton team that's rock solid in terms of not turning the ball over. This is still one of the better free throw shooting teams that you're going to find in all of college basketball, but they just haven't been quite as efficient on offense this year as they were last year. Last year, they were a top 35 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. This year, they're checking in more around about 111. So we've seen a little bit of a fall off there. You can tell that they're missing Matt Aloko from a season ago. Xavion Lee has still been rock solid. 16 points, 6 boards, 6 assists, steal and half per contest. He's shooting 38.5% from 3, and as a matter of fact, for this bunch, each of their top 4 scorers are all shooting at least 38.2% from 3-point range. You've been able to have Camden Pierce along with Dallin Davis give you between 11.5 to 12.5 points per game apiece, and Pierce is able to give you 7 boards per contest, but outside of Lee and Pierce, nobody else gives you north of 3.1 rebounds per contest, and I mean, both of these guys have been relatively okay at the free throw line, though Pierce is really starting to fall as well. I think that he's actually down to 56% at the free throw line, and for Princeton, they're shooting 66.5% as a collective at the free throw line as well, so that's an even bigger issue for the team. I knew that I'd drop, but man, that has been not great to say the least, and when you take a look at what you're getting on the Akron side of things, they are shooting his collective about 35% from 3-point range. Isaiah Gray, he knows all about the Ivy League. He's been able to give you 9.5 points. He's shooting 44% from 3-point range. And then you've got Johnson squared as Nate Johnson along Tavari Johnson have been able to combine for just under 25 points per contest, to combine 7 assists to about 4.5 turnovers per game. So these guys have been solid for Akron. They should be able to do a nice job down low with James Okonkwo being able to haul in there about 8.5 rebounds, block per contest as well. For Akron, the 13 turnovers per game, a little bit unsightly. And for Princeton, they've been a little bit better at generating turnovers than they have been in past years. This is also a Princeton team that has been able to buckle down just a skoge more with regards to their defense, giving up fewer than 70 points in 4 of their last 5 games. It feels like Akron is trying to get back to their roots a little bit more as well, because this is just not an Akron team that you're used to seeing. The fact that They started out the year giving up north of 70 points in all but one of their games against Division I opponents. That was a little bit less than savory, to say the least. So I do think that they are going to be starting to hunker down just a little bit more on that front. I do think that with Princeton and the way that they play a very low possession style of basketball is for Princeton, they always run that slow, methodical offense right now in terms of total possessions per game, checking in about 220th in all of college basketball. That'll limit some of the scoring opportunities they're going to get in this game. Did semi-total 153, and I still think that you get quite a bit of efficiency, but I do think that with the job that Akron does on the boards, and again, Princeton, typically a really good free throw shooting team outside of Lee, you're just not having these guys making the free throws. I think that could be very costly in this spot. So semi-total 153.5, I'm in on the under with Akron. I'm willing to take the 6 with them, set them as a 5.5 point dog. 855, 856, another game that I'll write up as Western Michigan is on the road against Michigan State. Michigan State is a favorite of 27 points, and total on this game, it is between 146 or 146.5. Did set my line at 21.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points. You've got two teams that actually have similar fortes and weaknesses. As for Western Michigan right now, they are 41st in the country in terms of rebound rate. Michigan State is actually second in all of college basketball, which I find to be very jarring. I knew that they would be able to be a little bit better down low, but didn't think that you get as much as you have out of the Longwood transfer and Simon Zapala. He's a true 7-footer that stepped in, only giving the team about 5 points, but 5.5 boards, about a block per contest. You've had Frankie Fiddler give you some nice versatility, 9.5 points, 3.5 boards. So like what these guys are doing, and Michigan State, they are also shooting about 80.5% at the free throw line. Out of their top 8 scores, all but one of them shooting at least 80% at the free throw line, with Cohen Carr being the lone outlier with that. But for Western Michigan, I do think that they're going to do an okay job down low in this game. Owen Lobsinger has really good versatility, 11.5 points, 7 boards at 6'9". He'll shoot about 32% from three-point range, and both of these teams stink from three-point range. I do think that Michigan State is going to shoot better than the sub at 29% that they're shooting from three-point range right now. Western Michigan on the road, they are allowing opponents to shoot about 40% from three-point range, so I do think that goes northward in this game, but both of these teams just not shooting it well from three-point range, to say the least. Now, for this Western Michigan team, you've been able to get some relatively good, shall we say, production out of the backcourt. Javon Hanna, he's been able to give you nice versatility, 11 points, 4 boards, a little bit over his seal per contest. Missed a few games due to injury, but feels like he's starting to find his sea legs ever since he's come back from injuries, double figures in 2 out of those 3 games since he's returned. You've also been able to get quite a bit, 12.5 points per contest out of Markai Strickland, as well as come on as a little bit of, shall we say, a surprise, as began his career over at St. Louis, didn't do a lot with Western Michigan last year due to injury, shooting about 38.5% from three-point range, so he's been rock solid for this team, especially with having now Chancey Willis being able to come on strong as well. He's been able to supply the team with 17 points per contest, came in from the non-Division I level, was banged up towards the beginning part of the year. Think that there might have been some eligibility questions as well, but for Western Michigan, they're only turned the ball over about 10 times per contest. Michigan State never has been and never will be a team that generates a whole bunch of turnovers. Jeremy Fears has done a nice job of being able to dole it out for them, but not too much of a score, only about 8 points per contest. He's giving you about 6 assists, a steal per game, so I've been liking what I've been seeing there, and he's been able to give you 4+ assists with 2 turnovers or fewer in 4 of the last 5 games, so that's been rock solid against a Western Michigan team that has yet to really find that main facilitator. But I do think that with both of these teams lacking from three-point range, with Western Michigan being a team that can match up with Michigan State on the boards, that this summer has gone a little bit too far. Now, hopefully Western Michigan is able to get the job done with regards to a cover, unlike a few days ago when they blew that big lead. But that said, I'm going to go back in on Western Michigan. I'm willing to take the points, set them as a 21.5 point dog, and I did set my total at 141.5, with both of these teams really lacking from three-point range, and Western Michigan being a little bit of a lower tempo team. So in on the under, and I'm writing up the points with Western Michigan. 857, 858. This is another game that I'll write up, as Cornell is playing against Siena. Siena is a underdog of 10.5 points, and the total on this game between 147 to 147.5. Writing up the total over, I set my total at 155.5. Cornell has gotten to at least 74 points in all but one of their games this far this season. Fully recognize that this is a Siena team that's well outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game, but Cornell just seems to get their up-tempo style, and they're in the top 50 in terms of total possessions per game in darn near every single game that they play in. And also for Cornell, they're outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis when they're at home. It's been a little bit of a downtrodden season for Siena with regards to their offensive efficiency, but they're only scoring about a point less per 100 possessions when they're on the road rather than at home, so they've been able to maintain some, shall we say, consistency with regards to their offense when they have been on the road. You've been able to have a few guys come up from the non-D1 ranks, like Major Freeman was a big-time junior college transfer, and he's been able to supply the team with 14 points, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range, and with the Siena team, with not having a lot down low, should be a lot of second chance opportunities for both of these teams. Siena does not have a single guy in the roster that's giving you north of 4.3 rebounds per game, as you've got Brandon Quayle, who's saying 6'7". He's been able to give you about 4.5 boards, does shoot 41.5% from three-point range. Siena looking to cut down on the 12.5 turnovers per game, and typically Cornell is pretty solid at being able to generate turnovers. Haven't done as much of that thus far this season, and for this Cornell defense, they come in having allowed at least 80 points in all but one of their games ever since Thanksgiving. So that's a bit of an issue for them. Cornell doesn't necessarily have a great rebounder as well, other than the guy Ragland, who's been able to give you 10.5 points, 6 boards per contest, so he's been solid there, but you've got a lot of guys that are able to do it out. AK Okereke has been able to give this team right around about 4.5 boards, 4.5 assists per game, so that's been nice. And then Nazir Williams is a little bit of a do-it-all guy, 4 rebounds, 3 assists. He's leading the way with 14 points per game, as Cornell can be a little bit hit or miss from three-point range. You're not necessarily excelling because of their great three-point shooting, and they never truly have. They're shooting about 34.9% from three. They're year in and year out one of the top teams in terms of their two-point shooting percentage, being a whole is greater than the sum of its parts sort of team, and they've been doing much of that thus far this season, as they've got 9 separate guys. They're seeing north of 11 minutes per game. It's a very tough style to be able to really match up with. And for Siena, to their credit, the defense has actually been very good recently, giving up fewer than 70 points in 4 of their last 5 games. But again, Cornell just has that uncanny ability to be able to get their tempo. I think that they're going to do that, and that's going to throw Siena out of sorts. So I did set my line at 11.5. I'm going to be willing to lay the 10.5 with Cornell, and I'm going to be writing up the over, as I do think that Cornell going to be able to dictate the terms with regards to the tempo. 859, 860 on the betting board. Rutgers is playing us Columbia. Columbia is an underdog of 12 to 12.5 points. Balanced game between 154.5 to a 155. I said Columbia as an 8-point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take the points. For Rutgers, we have seen a big departure with their defense because they bring in 2 top-flight freshmen and Ace Bailey, along with Dylan Harper, who have been great on the offensive side of things. These 2 guys have been able to combine for about 41 points per contest. Between the 2 of them, you're getting about 12.5 rebounds. Harper has been your main facilitator with 4 assists, a steal per contest. Both guys shooting in that neighborhood about 34% from three-point range, but they are now down to about 149th of the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, part of it is you lose Cliff Amarui, who is such a good rebounder. You've got Bailey, who's giving you 7.5 rebounds per game. Nobody else is giving you north of 5 boards per contest. So Jordan Durcock, the transfer from Merrimack, he's been able to give you about 8 points, 5 boards, 3 assists. A little bit of stat sheet suffer for this team, but you can tell that that defensive efficiency just is not there, and that should allow for a lot of open looks for a Columbia team that has been rock solid from three-point, shooting 37% from 3. Your top 2 players in Geronimo Rubio de la Rosa, along with Kenny Nolan, are both shooting north of 40% from 3. Nolan, a steal, 3.5 assists, 13 points per game, and De La Rosa, how about 19.5 points, 2.5 assists, and a steal and a half per contest for a Columbia offense that they're a mid-tempo offense. They're not going to play overly fast, but they only turn the ball over about 11.5 times per game. They themselves have each of their top 4 scorers, generating at least 1.2 steals per game. That includes Blair Thomas, who at 6'8", has good versatility, 9.5 points, shooting 34.5% from three-point range. Zadine Adi Badri, he comes over from the country of Algeria at 6'10". He's been able to give you about 5.5 boards. He's able to pop it out a little bit north of 30% from three-point range. For Columbia, you could use a little bit more depth, finding someone that can come in off the bench, give you a little bit more. Maybe that's a Jared O'Keefe now that he's come back from injury, as he was a little bit banged up towards the beginning part of the season. You could use a little bit more there, but overall, this is a Columbia team that with their starting 5 and the fact that they don't foul a ton, I do think that they're going to be able to hold in there against a Rutgers team that, again, they're much better on the offensive side of things. Defensively, they're really leaving something to be desired. I've yet to write this up, but I do think that when it's all said and done, I probably am going to be able to write this up, just because, again, with this Columbia team, name of the game for them, 3-point shooting. Now, Rutgers, always a different team when they are at the rack that cannot be discounted, but that said, this is a Rutgers team that right now is allowing opponents to shoot about 33.5 to 34% from 3. That's 189th in the country, so I think that this is a good matchup for Columbia. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Columbia. Semi-total 154. I do think that Rutgers will improve just a little bit with regards to their defense as well, so also in on this total under. We go to 861, 862 on the card. Monmouth is going to be on the road against Auburn. Auburn, a 35.5 to a 36-point favorite. This game between 153 to 153.5. I'm actually willing to lay it with Auburn. I did set them as a 38-point favorite. There was a little bit of fear that Gianni Broome might be a little bit banged up in the team's previous game just before the holidays. Well, he was not very banged up. He was looking very rock solid, as he's been able to give this team north of 18 points per game. He's giving you north of 11 rebounds per game, multiple blocks per contest. at 6'9" or so. He's been able to pop it from three-point range. Like, this guy is doing absolutely everything. It is remarkable, but on top of that, for Auburn, they are just overall number one in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. It's an incredibly efficient team that has really good facilitation as well. Broome himself is able to give you 3 assists per game, but Chad Baker-Mazara, he's able to throw in there about 3 assists, 13 points per game. He shoots 37% from 3. Taj Pettiford, Denver Jones, both shooting north of 44% from the outside. Both are giving you an identical 11.3 points per contest. They combine for about 5.5 assists per game. Team is a relatively mid-tempo team. They are outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game, but they only turn the ball over about 9 times per game. And Monmouth, they have already won a game on the road against Seton Hall, but we know where the Seton Hall team is. But other than Abdi Bashir, who's been able to give you 21.5 points, shooting 42.5% from 3, you just don't have a lot to speak of for this Monmouth team. And Monmouth is just going to get plowed down low. Do have Joey Valencia, who's got 6'9" size, who's been able to give the team about 6 boards per contest, a little bit over a block per game. And last year was a good three-point shooter. This year, down to about 31% from three-point range, but they just don't really stand a chance with that regard. It is a Monmouth team that has been turning the ball over about 12.5 times per contest. Not necessarily a super fast Monmouth team, not necessarily a super slow Monmouth team, though, either. In terms of total possessions per game, checking in about 186, so can't get much more, shall we say, nation average than that. And also for Monmouth, they have had a tough time being able to guard the three-point line on the road, allowing opponents to shoot about 35.5% from three-point range, is a little bit less than savory, and really the bigger issue for the team. Where is the scoring going to be coming from? As right now they are 290th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Auburn, for how efficient they are on the offensive side of things, they've been really rock solid with regards to their defense when they've been at home. We've seen a few issues for them on the road, but I do think that they're going to put the clamps down on Monmouth. Monmouth not going to be able to get really any second chances whatsoever in this game, as Monmouth has scored 63 points or fewer in 3 of their last 5 games, 67 or fewer in 4 of their last 5, and this Auburn team really starting to rise up with that defense ever since that game against Duke, have yet to allow more than 70 points in a game. So did set my total 152. I'm in on the under. And with Auburn, I'm going to be willing to lay the big number, set them as a 38-point favorite, 863, 864 on the betting board. Kansas State plays us to Cincinnati. Yes, Bill Belichick, we're on to Cincinnati, who's on to being a 4-point favorite, and your total on this game, 140.5. Don't want to lay much more than a 4, but I'm going to be willing to lay the 4. Now, for Cincinnati, right now, a top 40 team in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis, and you do have to take a little bit of caution with that just because they have been beating up on, shall we say, some lesser competition thus far this season. But, I mean, man, when it comes to this Kansas State team, they were only up 2 points at the half against Mississippi Valley State a few weeks ago, and it just feels like a bunch of broken pieces right now. Like, Doug McDaniels had himself a relatively solid year, 9.5 points, 4.5 assists, and 2.2 turnovers per game. Team as a whole shooting 36% from 3. If you look at the raw metrics, Kansas State hasn't been bad. Coleman Hawkins, whatever the game calls for, he's able to give you. He's supplying the team with over 9 points, 7 boards, 4 assists, 2.5 steals, 1.5 blocks. He's able to pop it from three-point range at about 6'10" or so, but I mean, you're now without Akur. They have been having Brandon Housen being the top scorer with about 43% three-point shooting, but he's a little bit more of a one-trick pony sort of player, and I do think that Cincinnati just going to take the fight to the team down low. So Mitchell has been able to give you 7.5 boards per contest. As a matter of fact, you've got 3 different guys on the roster that are giving you 5+ rebounds per game, with Dan Skillings now returning as well. He was one of the top scorers for the team a season ago. Still trying to find really his bearings with regards to this team, as he's only played 5 games, but now he's giving you 10 points, 5 boards, and a steal and a half per contest, as East Fandango has been able to give you 2 blocks per contest as well. And this is a Cincinnati team that they really get after you on the defensive side of things, but they also don't beat themselves on offense as well. For Cincinnati, only about 9.5 turnovers per game. Jizzle James has really been able to take that next step forward in terms of the backcourt, giving you about 12 points, 5 assists to 1.5 turnovers per game, shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range, while Simeus Lucasius is shooting 42% from three-point range as well. This is a Cincinnati team that I don't think that they're quite as good as their sterling metrics, because they have been beating up on lesser competition, but this has been a team that has been really good on defense recently. Like, the last time Cincinnati gave up north of 70 points in a game, you have to go all the way back to last season. They have not done so thus far this season. Meanwhile, for Kansas State, this has been a unit that has lost a ton of games recently. They're offense has been miring in mediocrity, 71 points or fewer in each of their last 3 games, including a game that went to overtime. So I do think that Cincinnati going to be able to put Kansas State in a little bit of a chokehold. Set my total at a 136.5, so in on the under, and willing to lay the 4 with Cincinnati. 865, 866 on the betting board. Arizona is going to be playing host to TCU, and TCU does find themselves as 14.5 point underdogs. Dalton's game is 146.5. Did set my total at 148.5. I'm in on the over. We have seen Arizona get held down a few times this season, and the TCU defense isn't bad, but it's not quite on par with, say, a Duke, a UCLA. Those are 2 of your top defenses that you're going to find in all of college basketball. And for TCU, I don't know if they're going to be able to maintain being number 21 in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, because now they're without Frankie Collins, a guy that was in the top 15 nationally in terms of steals per game. 8 seasons ago, he was the top scorer for TCU last year as well. Now, Ernest Uday should be able to match up with Toby Awaka down low. Both of these guys for their respective teams are giving you about 8 or so rebounds per game. And Jaden Bradley has been very nice for this Arizona backcourt as well. He's been able to give the team 11.5 points, generating 2.5 steals per contest. He's shooting about 32% from 3-point range, and that's better than what we could say out of Caleb Love. And Caleb Love has been a volume scorer over his career, but just has not been very efficient this year. He's shooting less than 30% from 3-point range. He's been rounded into form a little bit more ever since he had a really, really bad game against Duke. He's been able to supply the team with 15 points per contest, but you tell that it's just not been there for him thus far this season. And for this team, they're also dealing with a little bit of an injury to Modeuvis Krivas, the 7'2" big man who's currently dealing with a little bit of an injury. So Henry Vassar has needed to step up a little bit more for this team. That's a big reason why I did set my number at a 12.5. Arizona actually a little bit improved on the defensive side of things, 24th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but also taking some big giant strides back with regards to their offense as well. This is an Arizona unit that they play fast. They're 32nd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but feels like they've really just been beating up on a lot of lesser competition for TCU. Even with the Collins injury, they still have been able to hold up defensively, giving up in regulation 72 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games. So do you think that this game is going to be slowed down just a little bit more? But again, I do think that Frankie Collins injury is going to be hurting TCU just a little bit with regards to their defense, but I think that they get enough scoring from someone like Hassan Alouette, who's come in, giving the team 10 points per contest. I like what Noah Reynolds is able to do as a facilitator, giving you about 3.5 assists per game. And then you've been able to get some good 3-point shooting with about 6 points per contest, 37% 3-point shooting out of Micah Robinson, a 6'6" freshman that should be seeing some more minutes moving forward, 6+ points in each of the last 4 games with all the injuries. So I do think that TCU scores just enough in this game to be able to hold in there. I did set my total at 148.5, so I'm in on the over, and I'm going to take the points with TCU, set them as a 12.5 point underdog. 867, 868 on the betting board. It's Houston, and they are on the road against Oklahoma State. How about them Cowboys, who are at home, a 12-point underdog? Total on this game is between 137 to a 137.5, and I'm going to be willing to take this total over. I did set my total at 137.5. Houston has been a top 10 team in the country in terms of 3-point shooting percentage at 41%. I will say they're shooting in that neighborhood about 44.5% from 3-point range at home. That falls more in the mid-30s from 3-point range when they are on the road, and this has been a Houston team that their numbers are a little bit warped right now because they have played against some lesser competition, albeit they did play against the likes of San Diego State and company out here in lovely Las Vegas to be able to help that out a little bit. But I do think that Oklahoma State has been able to really find their sea legs under Coach Steve Lutz, who's done a nice job of having a pair of big men in Abdu Usman along with Marcellus Avery combined for a little bit over 25 points, 11 rebounds. Usman is able to give you a block per contest and has actually shot 62.5% from 3-point range. Should see a little bit of a fall off there, but Oklahoma State, much like the Lutz teams over at Texas A&M Corpus Christi, much like the teams over at Western Kentucky, they're looking to generate some turnovers, and they've been pretty good at being able to do so. They're generating about 9.5 steals per game. Oklahoma State still leaving something to be desired on offense. They're about 123rd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis as the backcourt. Not necessarily super dynamic. Brandon Newman, Arturo Dean, these are 2 guys giving you about 7.5 points per contest. And Dean, he does throw in there a little bit over 2 steals per contest as well. So that's been pretty impressive. And as we know, Houston, year in and year out, just one of your best defenses that you're going to find in all of college basketball. Houston, once again, outside the top 3 in terms of total possessions per game. LJ Cryer, Emmanuel Sharp are combining for about 29.5 points per contest, and Sharp is shooting 49% from 3. Again, this team just is not shooting the same way from 3-point range on the road rather than at home, but They always have a top 5 turnover differential in all of college basketball. Right now, they're only turning the ball over about 9.5 times per game. Just in terms of steals and steals alone, they're generating 8.5 per contest. Terrence Arnoux has been able to give you double figures. He's throwing in there about a steal and a half per contest. And Milo Suzana has done a nice job of being able to fill the shoes that were very, very hard to fill with Jamal Shed a season ago. He's been able to give the team 9 points, 5 assists, only turned the ball over about a time and a half per contest, and shooting darn near 40% from three-point range. Joseph Tugler, Jawan Roberts, these two guys are combining for about 13 rebounds per game, and it's going to be a tough road to hoe for this Oklahoma State team, just taking down a Houston team that year in and year out. They're one of the best teams in the country with regards to rebound percentage, but this has been an Oklahoma State team that is about 40th in the country with regards to rebound rate. Houston right now, they're checking in more in that pocket about 37, so I do think that they're going to be able to hold up on the glass. That'll allow them to hold in this game. So at a 12 plus, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Oklahoma State. Do you think that you see a lot of made threes in this game? So in on the over semi total 137.5. 869, 870 on the betting board. Arkansas plays us to Oakland. Oakland does find themselves as a underdog of 18.5 points. Total on this game, it is 143, and I said Arkansas is a 23.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. I've been liking what I've been seeing out of Arkansas recently, and getting a healthy Jonas Adu back is big because his numbers last year were very rock solid when he was over at Tennessee. This year he was really dealing with injury in the first few games of the season, but has been able to emerge, give the team double figures over the last few games, and I think that that's going to be big for them moving forward. And then you've got a lot of just guys with untapped potential, for lack of a better term. DJ Wagner, a former top 15 recruit, seems to be coming into his own a little bit as well. He's been able to supply the team with about 10 points, 3.5 assists, now shooting north of 40% from three-point range overall for the season, and has been able to supply double figures in 4 of the last 5 games. He's doing a nice job being able to take care of the ball, reducing those turnovers. Abdou Thiero, not a guy that's really going to stretch you out from the outside, but gives you 17.5 points, 5.5 boards. Having Trayvon Brazile healthy as well is so big because at 6'10", I think that he's got really limitless potential. He's supplied 6+ boards, 11+ points each out of the last 3 games, and 8 blocks in those last 2 games against Central Arkansas and North Carolina A&T as well. So he's coming on strong, and for this Oakland team, they still do rank outside the top 240 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. They showed in the Diamond Head Classic out in Hawaii that they're much better than this. Allen, David, and Becca, who comes over from UMKC. He's been rock solid down low, 13 points, 6 boards at a block and a half per contest, and that's really the shift that Oakland has made this season. Typically, Oakland is a team that loves to just gun it from three-point range. You've got the goggles man and Malcolm Chrissy, who's shooting about 34% from 3, and all he does is shoot threes, 11 points, but 1 rebound, shooting 34% from three-point range, but clearly isn't what Jack Golke was a season ago. You've been able to get Bari Nuviera down low, be able to give you about 8 or so rebounds per game as well. So Oakland has been able to do a relatively okay job there, but again, with Jonas Adu and Brazile coming on strong for this Arkansas team, on top of that, Boogie Flang giving you an assist-to-turnover ratio that is north of 3 against an Oakland team that is well outside the top 255 in terms of turnovers forced on a per-possession basis. That should allow for a lot of clean possessions for this Arkansas team. I do think that Oakland, who has been ranking outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game, they're going to start to speed up just a little bit. I semi-total 143.5, so right now seeing a 143, that's a max I'm going to be willing to take the over on, but going to be willing to take the over with Arkansas being a top 25 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis at home, and Oakland starting to find a little bit more offense, but with Arkansas also made them 23.5 point favorite. Want to lay the number. 871, 872 on the betting board. Colorado plays with Iowa State. Iowa State a 9 to 9.5 point road favorite. Total on this game 146.5 to a 147. Could be willing to take the points with Colorado. I did set them as a underdog of 8.5 points because I do think that that elevation factor is so big, even though you might not get as packed of a crowd as you would in, say, 2 to 3 weeks from now because kids are away for break. I do think that Colorado could be able to remain quite lively in this game against an Iowa State team that has been really good with their offense. Like we always talk about the Iowa State defense, and the Iowa State defense still rock solid, still a top 25 unit in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, still doing a nice job generating turnovers, but Iowa State currently number 3 in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and in a road or neutral court setting, number 1 in all of college basketball with this regard. Mila Mimosilovic at 6'8", lending good versatility, 11.5 points per game on 45.5% three-point shooting, and then it's been all about Keshawn Gilbert along with Curtis Jones, both giving you 16 to 16.5 points per game, combining for over 8 assists, 2.5 steals per contest, while Taymon Lipsby has been a little bit more of a defensive stopper. He has seen his three-point shooting percentage dip a little bit, but still gives you 4 assists, 2.5 steals, 10 points per contest, so I have to love what you're seeing there. But for Colorado, you do have some nice versatility with this team. Now, the issue that you do have with Colorado, the 14 turnovers a game against an Iowa State team that, again, one of the best teams at being able to generate turnovers in all of college basketball, but Trevor Baskin, Elijah Malone, These are two guys that come up from the non-D1 ranks. They've been combining for about 20.5 points, 10.5 boards. They do a nice job of just helping flow this team, especially Baskin, who gives you a steal and a block per contest. And Malone at 6'10", it's not on high volume, but he is shooting about 50% from three-point range. This is a Colorado State team as a whole. They do shoot about 37% from the outside, and just is a much more efficient team when they're at home rather than on the road. For Colorado, they are averaging about 14 more points per 100 possessions when they are at home rather than in a road/neutral court setting. That elevation factor, I think, is going to be big for an Iowa State team that, frankly, is just not used to it. Last time Iowa State and Colorado were in the same conference was well over a decade ago, back in the old Big 12, but Andre Yagmovsky, about 11 points, 5 boards per contest as well for this Colorado team. It is a much improved Iowa State team on glass as well. You've been able to have Joshua Jefferson go off for about 8.5 rebounds per game, and that was really the main kryptonite for Iowa State last season. Still not going to be like a top 5 team or anything like that with regards to rebound rate, but they've been able to elevate this year to being about 34th with this regard. But I do think that Colorado is 50th with this regard, going to be able to hold in there. I do think that elevation factor is going to be very big and slow things down just a little bit in this game as well. I did set my total at 146.5. Here at the 147, I'm in on the under, and I'm willing to take the points with Colorado. 873, 874 on the betting board. Portland is on the road against Oregon State, and Oregon State does find themselves as 19-point favorites, and Dylan's game is 141.5. Oregon State has covered all but 2 of their games this far this season, albeit it was their most recent 2 games, but I'm going to be willing to lay it. This Portland team looked completely lifeless a few days ago when they played at home against Washington State, and for Portland, I mean, there's just not a lot to build around. Right now, Vukasa Masic, he's got good 6'6" versatility. He's been able to give you about 10 points, 4 boards per contest, and Austin Rapp is a guy that I like. Comes in from down under in Australia, 14 points, 6.5 boards, 2.5 assists. He's been able to shoot about 40% from three-point range, and supplied with the team with 15-plus points in each of their last 4 games, but you just have nothing else to build around now. Michael Rata was not necessarily great in the Diamond Head Classic, still has been able to lead the way for Oregon State, 15.5 points, 8.5 boards, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range at 6'7", but you need him to be a little bit better. I do think that coming back onto the mainland, being able to come back and just be able to get that out of his system, I think is going to be big, and this is a downgraded competition playing against the likes of Nebraska and company, and you do have DeMarco Minor, who's been very major for this Oregon State team, 10.5 points, 5.5 assists, 2.2 steals, 4.5 rebounds per game. And this has been an Oregon State team that has really been able to get after it defensively as well. Top 40 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Oregon State also a team that ranks in the top 35 with regards to their overall rebound rate, albeit this is an Oregon State team that they do take a little bit of a drop off when they are on the road because they do have a really good home court advantage at Corvallis, a very difficult place to get to. That does really help them out with regards to their defense, but even on the road, they've been pretty rock solid. 18th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and Portland at this point really doesn't have too much of a home court advantage in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. They're outside the top 270 in both regards, and they're giving up 3 more points per 100 possessions when they are at home rather than when they're on the road. They somehow, some way took Oregon to overtime earlier in the year. I'm not sure how. They've been an okay 3-point shooting team at about 34.5% from the outside. Vincent Delano has been a big reason why he's shooting 35.5% for the outside. Supplies the team with about 7 points, 2 assists, and a steal per game. And Max McKinnon, who comes over from Elon, about 10 points and 5 boards per contest, but you're just not getting a lot from this team down low. I do think that Oregon State going to be able to overrun them there, and Nate King's shooting about 50% from 3. That's also big with regards to this backcourt. I do think that Oregon State, after a few rough games out there in Hawaii, they're going to be able to get back with regards to their defense, but I think that they bludgeon this Portland team as well, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number, set my number at a 21, and with regards to this total, made my total 137.5. I'm also in on this total under. 875, 876 on the betting board. Washington State plays us Loyola Marymount. The Mount finds themselves as 8.5 to a 9-point underdogs. So it's game between 149.5 to a 150. Set my line at 8.5 and a 9+. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Loyola Marymount. A really nice win a few days ago for Washington State on the road against Portland, but it does hurt me talk about Portland is not so great to say the least this season. And for Washington State, the biggest fear that I have with this team is the turnovers. They are turning the ball over about 15 times per contest, outside the top 300 in terms of ball security, and they're still without Cedric Coward. Cedric Coward has not been seen since Thanksgiving, and that was their top scorer. So Nate Calmenzi has had to really pick up the load. He and Lawan Watts are combining for 8 assists, about 30 points per game between the two of them, and well, Calmenzi does not necessarily shoot it well from 3-point range. Isaac Watts, Lawan Watts, Dane Erikstrup, Ethan Price, their scorers pretty much 2 through 5 when you got Coward out of the fold, all shooting at least 36% from 3-point range, all supplying you with at least 11.5 points per game. And other than Eric Strupp, I'll give you at least 4.8 rebounds per game. So really good versatility on that side of things. Now they do have to match up with Devin Porter. That is of relation to Michael Porter, who's on the Denver Nuggets, 14 points, 8 boards, only shooting about 30% from three-point range, but has good versatility at 22 of the team's 55 points against San Francisco over the weekend. And with Loyola Marymount, you just don't have a lot around him. Alex Merkfeld, as down low, has been a relatively solid rebounder, giving you about 7 boards, 11.5 points per game. But MJ Amy, who comes over from San Jose State, last year at San Jose State, 15.5 points, shot 36% from 3 with 3 assists per game, 7.5 points, less than assists, and shooting 25.5% thus far this season. Has given the team 8+ points in each of the last 4 games, so he's looked a little bit better recently, but that has been a little bit rough for a Loyola Marymount team that they're not like turning the ball over a ton or anything like that. They're only turning the ball over about 11 times per game for the advantage of Washington State, though. They're not necessarily generating a lot of turnovers as well, but for this Loyola Marymount team, even though they're doing everything okay, like they're 136th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're not terrible, but they're not great at being able to guard the 3-point arc. In terms of points scored on a per possession basis, they're about 238th in the country, a little bit better when they are at home. It's just been a case where it's been sort of meh with the team. Caleb Stone-Carroll shooting 40% from 3, 13 points per contest, and Will Johnson 3.5 assists, less than a turnover per game. That's been relatively rock solid, but for Loyola Marymount, even though they keep things relatively clean, it's not resulted in necessarily great offense. The defense has been slipping up a little bit, giving up 69+ points in 4 out of the last 5 games, and for Washington State, they've actually been able to step up just a skosh with regards to their defense as well. This is a defense that has now given up 70 points or fewer in 3 out of their last 5 games, so an interesting sort of situation here. I did set my total at a 146.5, so seeing the 150, I'm in on the under, and at 9+, I'm going to be willing to take these points with Loyola Marymount. 877, 878 on the betting board. It is San Francisco playing us to Santa Clara. This will be a game that I write up, as Santa Clara is a 4 to 4.5 point underdog. Total on this game is 146. I set my total at 137.5. I'm going to be writing up the under. San Francisco, a top 15 team in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. These guys, for lack of a better term, they're just getting after it. And for Santa Clara, this has been a unit that has been, shall we say, touch and go with regards to both their offense and their defense. Christoph Tilley, I thought, was going to give you a little bit more down low, as he and Johnny O'Neal are back from a season ago. They're combining for about 9.5 rebounds per game, and this is still a solid rebound rate team for Santa Clara, but they're not quite that top 50 team like we were seeing a season ago. Now, Carlos Stewart, who began his career at Santa Clara, went for a year over at LSU, is now back. He's been able to start to find things a little bit more. He's given out 3+ assists in each of the last 5 games, but 3+ turnovers in the last 3 games as well. That's a little bit less than savory. Going up against a San Francisco team that has very active hands out there in the backcourt, you've got Malik Thomas, who's giving you 2 steals, 2.5 assists, 18 points per game. He's shooting 38.5% from 3. San Francisco as a whole, they shoot about 35.5% from the outside, despite each of your top 3 scorers shooting at least 38% from 3-point range, as you've been able to get about 10 points, 5.5 boards out of Tyrone Riley. He shot it well from 3, and Marcus Williams currently shooting 47% from the outside, 4 boards, 4 assists, 13.5 points per game. I do think that this is going to be a little bit overwhelming for Santa Clara to take in. I did set San Francisco as a 5.5 point favorite as a result, and it is a Santa Clara team that has been slipping up quite a bit with regards to their defense, 74+ points allowed in each of their last 4 games, but part of that is the teams that they're playing. They played against a Bradley team that's number 1 in the country in terms of 3-point shooting percentage. Kennesaw State, South Dakota, these are super duper up-tempo teams, so I do think that things are going to be calmed down a little bit more here. Adama Ball has been able to give you 14 points per contest, but I really love the way that San Francisco is getting after things defensively, and for both of these teams, even though neither of them necessarily have that one guy that's going to give you like a double-figure amount of rebounds or anything like that, both of these teams have been able to do a relatively solid job on the glass. You've got a San Francisco team that's in the top 100 with regards to rebound rate. Santa Clara, they're hovering more in that neighborhood, about 89, so I do think that there's not going to be a lot of second chances to be had here, so I'm rating up the under, and with San Francisco, willing to lay up to 5 with them. 879, 880 on the betting board. It is Pacific, and they are on the road against San Diego. San Diego is finding themselves between a pick'em to a 1-point favorite. So on this game, you're going to be getting this anywhere between a 144 to a 144.5. So I total 143.5. I'm in on the under, and I did set San Diego as the slim 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the very small number now with San Diego. This has been one of the more putrid offenses in all of college basketball, well outside the top 250 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. As a unit, they just have not been able to find it from three, but down low, they've been able to do a pretty solid job. Stephen Jamerson along with Santiago Truot, these two guys are combining for a little bit under 17 rebounds per game. They're both giving you a combined 17 points per contest. It's really been up to KJ Bradley to be headlining the backcourt. 2 steals, 3.5 assists, 15.5 points per contest for a team that's currently shooting 26% from three-point range, and Devin Dolke is like the only guy in the roster that's shooting above 32% from three-point range. He's been supplying the team with only about 5.5 points per game, so that has been a little bit less than tremendous for the San Diego team, but it's not like Pacific's batting down the hatches with their three-point shooting either. They're shooting 28.5% from three-point range. I think that Elias Rolfe is probably going to be the best player out there on the floor. 17.5 points, 8 rebounds per contest. He actually comes in from the country of Canada, which is where Dave Smart spent many years coaching over at Carleton University. He spent a little bit of time as an assistant over at Texas Tech. That's how he landed both Elijah Fitcher along with Lamar Washington. Washington has been a good facilitator. 11.5 points, 5.5 boards, 6.5 assists. He's come in and been a top 15 player in all of college basketball in terms of assists per game, but he's also turned the ball over about 3.5 times per contest. It's a Pacific unit. Then overall, they turn the ball over 12 times per game. That's relatively acceptable. You've got Petar Krtopic, who needs to give you a little bit more from the outside. When he was over at Florida National, was always a career north of 35% three-point shooter, shooting just 25.5% from three-point range this season. I do think that San Diego is going to be able to win from within. I think that that's going to be key in this game. You've got a Pacific team that actually gave you a relatively spirited effort a few nights ago against St. Mary's. They were able to hold in there, get that cover in for San Diego. Just 246th in the country with regards to rebound percentage. It's a Pacific team that they're hovering more around about 180th or so, but I do think that the home court advantage going to be big for San Diego in this ordeal. I think that San Diego is going to be able to take care of the ball against a Pacific team that has not really been generating any turnovers whatsoever and having those clean possessions. I think allows San Diego to get the job done. Since San Diego's a 1.5 point favorite, I'm willing to lay up to 1 with them, and somebody told 143.5, so you're at the 144. I'm in on the under 881, 882 on the betting board. It's Gonzaga on the road against Pepperdine. Waves of Pepperdine are a 21 to a 22-point home underdog. Total on this game between 157.5 to a 158. Set my line at 21. I'm going to be willing to take the 22 with Pepperdine. This is a Pepperdine unit that is actually doing quite a few things relatively well. Ed Schilling comes on over from the East Coast, and he's got these guys really playing some solid basketball. I love what I've been seeing out of Stefan Torvik. He's a 6'8", little bit of a do-it-all dynamo guy who has been able to shoot north of 40% from three. He's supplying the team with 19.5 points per game, hauling in there north of 6 rebounds per game. Dovidas Butka has been able to give you 7.5 rebounds per game, and Mo Odom, who comes on over from Pacific. He's 6th in the country in terms of assists per game, 12 points, shooting 40% from three, 7.5 assists, so about 2.3 turnovers per game. He's been able to help out this Pepperdine team that is like a top 175 team in darn near every metric. They don't necessarily excel at one thing, but they're really not having that one big weakness that really stands out. Babacar Koulibaly down low has been able to give you about 7 boards, nearly 2 blocks per contest, and for Gonzaga, things have just looked very strange for them recently. Like, Graham Ike has either been really good or really bad in all of his games. 16 points, 6.5 boards, but sometimes finds himself in Mark Vi's doghouse. Now, Ryan Nembhard has been great at being able to dish it out. His 10 assists per game leads the country. He's averaging a double-double right now with those 12 points, 10 assists. Shoots 41% from three. Assists to turnover ratio that is well north of 4. Ben Gregg has been able to give you about 10 points and has a great name, by the way. And Nolan Hickman shoots 44% from the outside. It's a Gonzaga team that once again is in the top 15 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but they've honestly been a little bit more of a defense-oriented team as well. They are currently a top 35 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but you also do have a Pepperdine team that they've really been able to launch your offense as well. 76 plus points in each of their last 5 games. They have been cranking up the tempo quite a bit. This is not a Pepperdine team that generates a lot of turnovers, so it's an interesting ordeal here. I do think that you get a nice up and down game, though. Again, with Gonzaga, does feel like that defense has really been able to step up. 72 points or fewer allowed in each of their last 3 games, so they've been able to hold down the fort with that regard, and the offense has been a little bit more hit or miss as well, so I'm going to be in on the under. I did set my total 155, and being able to get 22, I'm in on the points with Pepperdine. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games, and another game that'll right up 883, 884. Cal Baptist is playing UC Irvine. Zot, the Anteaters are a 4-point road favorite, and your total on this game between 142.5 to a 143, and I set this total at 135.5. I'm rating up the the under. UC Irvine, third in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis away from home. Offense is leaving something to be desired because they are turning the ball over darn near 13 times per contest. As a result, they're about 180th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And this is a Cal Baptist team that is outside the top 320 in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, but they've got Dominique Daniels going off night in, night out for 22.5 points, 3.5 assists per game. But it is a Cal Baptist team that they only shoot about 30.5% from 3-point. They are shooting about 78% at the free throw line, so credit to them. And Kendall Coleman at 6'8" has really good versatility, 13 points, 8.5 boards. He's right now shooting 44% from the outside, so been liking what I've been seeing out of him. 12 plus rebounds in 3 of the team's last 5 games. AJ Braun has come in from right side. He has been Mr. Right for this backcourt, 9 points, 4.5 assists. He's shooting 40% for 3-point, just a little bit of stretch player. And then Martell Williams, who's been in and out of the lineup, he's back. He had 21 points in the most recent game against Jackson State. But this Irvine team, after they had a little bit of a rough go of it in their West Coast road trip defensively, giving up 70-plus points against Duquesne and Belmont, I think that they're going to be able to find their sea legs here. And I think that it's going to be hard to score on Bent Lutken, the 7-footer from Germany, 14.5 points, 8.5 boards, shooting 45.5% from 3. And it is an Irvine team that they do the little things well. If you find yourself in a closeout spot, and that's a big reason why I'm willing to lay it, this Irvine team is the top 5 team in the country in terms of free throw shooting percentage at 81.8%. Each of their top 5 scores shoot at least 79.3% at the free throw line. Miles Shea, Justin Owen have been able to combine for about 21 points per contest. Between the two of them, you're getting about 6 assists per game, and Owen has been able to shoot about 42% from the outside. Devin Tillis, 7.5 boards, 13 points at about 6'7", shooting 48% from 3-point. Relatively good depth with this team as well, so I do think that Irvine goes out there, gets the job done against a Cal Baptist team that's playing a little bit more up-tempo, but still outside the top 100 in terms of total possessions per game for Irvine. I do think that this defense really takes hold. So in on the under, I'll be writing that up, and I'm going to lay with UC Irvine. Now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-579, 306-580. Presbyterian is on the road against South Carolina. South Carolina 18.5 to 19-point favorites, and total on this game is 138.5 to 139. Did set my total at 143.5. I'm in on the over. It is a South Carolina team that is outside the top 175 in terms of total possessions per game, but you do have a Presbyterian team that's looking to play a little bit more up-tempo, and with Presbyterian playing a little bit more up-tempo, it has led to them not necessarily being the world's greatest team defensively as well, so that's been a little bit of a rough ordeal, and now they go up against a South Carolina team that should be able to just bludgeon on the glass. Colin Murray Boyles has been able to give this team 14-plus points, 8-plus boards, a little bit over a block per contest, while Presbyterian, they do have Jalen Peterson, great name. He's been able to supply the team with about 7.5 rebounds per game. And for Presbyterian, they are shooting north of 38.5% from 3-point range, with having Cody Mincy be able to give you 39.5% 3-point shooting. Mincy has been able to supply the team with 15 points per contest. Kobe Stewart has been able to throw in there about 14.5 points per game as well, but at the expense of being able to find some really good 3-point shooting looks. They have also been giving it up quite a bit from 3-point range as well. Presbyterian 302nd in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, so that's a little bit of an issue. Even though Presbyterian, to their credit, they don't necessarily turn the ball over a ton. They only turn the ball over about 11 times per contest. South Carolina not generating a lot of steals, so that'll lead to some nice clean possessions, but should see Jamari Thomas, Lon Jacoby Wright, who have both been shooting north of 38.5% from 3, find some good looks. They're combined for about 23 points per contest. Miles Sute has been a little bit down this year, but I do think that he's going to be able to rebound just a touch as well. And for South Carolina, heading into Christmas break, they were really able to ascend on offense ever since the beginning of the month of December. This team has been able to reach a 73-point plateau in every one of their games, and for that matter, South Carolina has gotten to at least 70 points in all but one of their games as far as the season, despite being a lower tempo team. And have a Presbyterian team that against Division I competition, well, they have now given up 80-plus points in each of their last 2 games, and that's been a case where they've been playing against a bunch of non-D1 teams that have really been propping up their numbers, and I do think that that's going to be nipping them in the bud sooner rather than later. So I'm in on the over, so my total 143.5, and want to lay up to 19 with South Carolina. 306-581, 306-582. McNeese is playing us to Southeast Louisiana. Southeast Louisiana is an underdog of 17 points. Total on this game is 134. So my line of 14.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Southeast Louisiana with McNeese. They just haven't been quite the same team that they've been in past years. Now, they did get the job done against New Orleans over the weekend. As a New Orleans team that's not good, to say the least, and McNeese has slipped outside the top 50 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and the offense still feels like it's looking for a little bit of identity. Sincere Carey has sincerely been their best scorer thus far. He's been able to give you about 15 points per contest, actually coming in off the bench in a lot of those games, but McNeese about 130th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. A little bit of this I do have to throw in there, byproduct of the fact that they have played a really tough non-conference slate. But for Southeast Louisiana, even though they don't have quite the same guys that McNeese does, they do bring in a guy in Sam Hines, who was a starter over at South Florida a few seasons ago. 15.5 points, 7.5 boards, 2.5 assists, shooting 43% from three-point range. Ja'Kavion Buckley comes in from Lamar. He's been the main facilitator with about 4.5 assists, nearly 2 steals per contest. It's a Southeast Louisiana team that needs to cut down on the 14 turnovers per game, and McNeese has been, ever since Will Wade took over, one of the better teams in terms of generating turnovers in all of college basketball. But Southeast Louisiana doing a nice job of being able to guard the three-point line on the road. Teams are shooting just 30% from three-point range against them, and for Southeast Louisiana, they play at a little bit more of a controlled pace in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Doesn't sound like much, but they're in the top 100 with that regard. I do think that they're going to hold up here against the McNeese team that they themselves, ever since Will Wade has taken over, they're a little bit more of a low and slow team themselves. I set my total on 130.5. I do think that you get a low scoring slog. I do think that with Brody Woodbury having his size at about 6'11", holding in there about 5 boards per contest, even though you might not be able to quite win that battle against the likes of Joe Charles, who's been able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game. Christian Schulmate, he's been rock solid in the Southland for a long time, 10.5 points, 5.5 boards, and then obviously you've got guys like Brian Settlebungwe along with Kedir Copeland, who give you nice contributions as well. That it keeps Southeast Louisiana lively in this game. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Southeast Louisiana, and I'm in on the under. 306.583, 306.584. Iowa plays host to New Hampshire. New Hampshire underdogs of 32.5 to 33 points. So this game is 158.5 to 159, and semi-total 162.5. I'm in on the over. Iowa, just year in and year out, they score darn near 15-plus points more per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than on the road, and we are once again seeing those big, giant home and road splits take effect this season, as Iowa, overall 26th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but averaging 18.7 points more per 100 possessions when they are at home rather than on the road, and they're going against a New Hampshire team that they're not getting anything functioning right now for New Hampshire. 346th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, albeit they're actually scoring more points per possession on the road rather than at home, and also about 312th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis on the road. Anthony McComb has been solid for this New Hampshire team. He's been able to supply the team with 15 points per contest, but they lost 4 out of their top 5 scorers from a season ago, and Trey Woodyard has been out for much of the season. He's the lone guy that's back from last year that averaged more than 5 points per game, and they just frankly don't have a lot down low. Emmanuel Akpomo has been able to give you about 4.5 rebounds per game. Now, Giancarlo Bastoni has had one game. He came in there in that game against Cornell at 35 minutes, 14 points, 12 rebounds. I don't know if that's a sign of things to come, but non-D1 transfer, first game of the year for him. I don't know if he was with eligibility or what have you, but that was a good sign for them, but I need to see more before I can put any stock into it. And then for Iowa, you've got Owen Freeman, who's able to supply the team with 17 points, 6.5 boards, 2 blocks, has been really good down low, and is also shooting 40% from three-point range, which has been big because Peyton Sanford has been a little bit down with his three-point shooting this year, only shooting about 34% from the outside, but it's been getting better as the season has went along. Josh Dix has been more of that sharpshooter for the team, shooting about 39.5% from the outside, 3 assists, 13.5 points per game. This is an Iowa team that always does a nice job taking care of the ball with only about 10.5 turnovers per game. And for New Hampshire, it's been very interesting with their tempo because they were actually one of the faster teams in all of college basketball last year. The lack of bodies has had them slowed down to about 217th in the country this season. Meanwhile, Iowa, top 20 team in terms of total possessions per game. I think that Iowa runs it, guns it, and takes it to a New Hampshire team that's been quite sorry this far this season. So I did set my line at a 36.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Iowa, and I'm in on the over. Set my total 162.5, 306.585, 306.586. Missouri is playing against Alabama State. Alabama State is an underdog of 23.5 points. 153.5 to 154.5 is your total, and set my line at 24.5. I'm going to be willing to lay the number for Alabama State. It's a lot better than it was a season ago. Last season, they were in the bottom 10 nationally with regards to their field goal shooting percentage, and you do have Madlock squared, as you've got Tony Madlock, the coach, and then his son TJ Madlock, who's just a do-it-all player that I really love, as he does whatever the game calls for. He's been able to supply the team with 12 points, 5 boards, 3 assists per contest, but now he has a little bit more help this year with Amar Knox along with CJ Hines combining for about 31.5 points per game. With both of these guys, they shoot above 36% from three-point range. Don't necessarily have a ton of rebounding for the team, though. Micah Octave has been able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game, but he's been out of the fold for quite a while for the team. He's really the only guy other than Madlock that gives you north of 4 rebounds per game, so they're really looking for someone that's going to be able to D up and give you something on the glass, and I think that that's going to be their undoing, because typically the way that you knock off Missouri is by being able to win from within. You've had this team be able to do a much better job on the glass this season with bringing in Mark Mitchell, who was over at Duke. He's been able to give you about 5 to 5.5 rebounds per game, and Josh Gray, the transfer from South Carolina, has been able to do a pretty rock-solid job there as well. And this is a Missouri team that, much like they did 2 seasons ago when they had success under Dennis Gates, they're now doing a much better job of being able to generate turnovers as well. This despite the fact that Caleb Grill has been in and out of the lineup all season long. You've got Mitchell along Tamar Bates, who've been able to combine for about 26.5 points per contest, but the guy that has really impressed me is the sophomore Anthony Robertson. He's been able to give you about 4 boards, 4 assists, 10.5 points per contest. Last year shot just 20.5% from 3. This year, I mean, it's still not great, but 30% from 3 rather than 20. That has really been a multiplier for the team. And overall, Missouri does shoot 37% from 3, despite the fact that they play fast. They're only turning the ball over about 10.5 times per contest. And for Alabama State, this has been a top 225 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but this is an Alabama State team that's also allowing opponents to shoot about 35.5% from 3-point range. I do think they get bludgeoned with that regard, and I do think that you see a lot of good clean offense. Alabama State only turned the ball over about 9.5 times per contest, so did so by total more around about a 156.5 here at the 153.5 in on the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 24 with Missouri. 36.587, 36.588. Vanderbilt is playing us to New Orleans. New Orleans, an underdog of 30.5 to 31.5 points. So on this game is 157.5. So by total 159.5, I'm in on the over. New Orleans, they have over the last 4 seasons been in the top 40 in terms of total possessions per game in every single year, and right now, they are back outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got a Vanderbilt team that they just do a nice job of not turning the ball over. Jason Edwards has been your main headline scorer. He's supplying the team with 19 points, a little bit over a seal, shooting 39.5% from 3-point range. But the joke with Vanderbilt was that everyone was listed as a point guard. Right now, A.J. Hogard has been that main man, 4 assists, 10.5 points per game. But everyone's protecting the ball really well. Only about 9.6 turnovers per game. M.J. Collins, Tyler Nickel, the 2 guys that come over from Virginia Tech, have been able to combine for about 18 points, shooting 35% from 3-point range apiece. So you have to like what these guys are doing. Grant Huffman has been able to throw in there a seal and a half, 3 assists per game. So love the way the Vanderbilt has been operating there. And for New Orleans, who knows if they're going to be able to do their part with regards to the total, because for New Orleans, they've gotten to 70 in a few games thus far this season, but really past being able to get to 70, it hasn't been much else for this team, as they have scored 70 points or fewer in all but one of their last, I believe now, 9 games, with the lone exception being that game that they played in overtime against Tulane, and they actually triumphed in that game. But you just have absolutely nothing down low for this New Orleans team. They've been relying upon James White for a little bit of everything. 19 points, 8 boards, began his career over at Ole Miss and UAB, shooting 37.5% from 3, and then Josh Short throws in their 37% 3-point shooting, 11 points per contest. But the team as a whole is shooting 29.5% from 3. Outside these 2 guys, you're getting nothing. The team is shooting 63.5% at the free throw line, and you've been able to have down low someone's able to give you about 8.5 points, 7 rebounds per game, and MJ Thomas. But man, this is a very top-heavy team that I think is going to get bludgeoned by a Vanderbilt team that I think is just going to come at them in waves and really be efficient on the offensive side. Things up I line at 31.5, so here at the 31 to 30.5, want to lay the number and in on the over as well. I'll be writing up this game. This is 306.589, 306.590. You've got Bryant playing on the road against Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon, a 12.5 point favorite of your total on this game, between 158 to 158.5. Set Bryant as a 9-point underdog, so I'm going to be writing up the points. This Grand Canyon team has just really slipped with regards to their offense. They're down to 199th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and Ryan Grant Foster has just went down the tubes this year. Last year he was averaging 20 points, 6 boards, shot about 34% from 3-point range, and he's still giving you some boards, he's still giving you like an assist, a steal per game, stuff like that, but he's only been able to throw in there about 13 points per game, and he's shooting less than 15% from 3-point range. Meanwhile, you've got Earl Timberlake bringing sexy back, 16.5 points, 8 boards, 5 assists. Not a guy that's going to really pop it from 3-point range, but just impacts the game in so many different ways. Bryant has actually been just as efficient with their offense when they've been on the road rather than at home. A top 125 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis when away from home, and each of your top 4 scorers are giving you at least 2.2 assists per game. It's a Bryant team that does play quite up-tempo, top 100 in terms of total possessions per game, with Rafael Pinzon being that main man from the outside, shooting 50.5% from 3, 19 points per contest. Bryant, a top 50 team with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage. Grand Canyon is outside the top 200 with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and though Jacoby Coles has come in from TCU, supplied the team with 14.5 points, 6 boards, he's been able to give you some nice, shall we say, versatility at about 6'5", 6'6". It is still a Grand Canyon team that they're shooting 30% from 3-point range now. You've been able to get more out of Mr. Moore Cullen Moore, 9.5 points, 4.5 boards, 2.5 assists. He's shooting about 42% from 3-point range, and For Grand Canyon, the rebounding is coming back with them as they had Duke Brandon out of the lineup for the first 4 games of the season. He's been able to supply the team with about 9 points, 8 rebounds per game. But for Grand Canyon, this has just simply been an underwhelming team. And for Bryan, this is a unit that does a very good job with regards to their offense. Against C1 opponents, they've gotten to at least 75 points in 3 of their last 4 games. And I do think that they are going to be able to really take it to a Grand Canyon team that's been scuffling with both their offense and their defense. So I do think the Grand Canyon going to be able to find a little bit more here in a higher possession game. I did set my total 163. I'm in on the over, and I'm rating up the points with Bryan. 306-591, 306-592. It's Mississippi State. They play Bethune-Cookman. Bethune-Cookman is a underdog of 29.5 points. Totals between 145 to 146. Another game that I'll write up is I'm rating up the points with Bethune-Cookman. I did set them as an underdog of 24.5 points. With Bethune-Cookman, they have brought in a lot of transfers in the offseason, and I feel like they're just starting to find their sea legs after a few games. Yeah, bring in a guy like a Brayon Freeman, who he was absolutely tremendous when he was over at Rhode Island 2 seasons ago. He was averaging 14-plus points per contest. He's doing the same year for this Bethune-Cookman team, and we've just seen some good efforts out of Bethune-Cookman. Recognize that things went down the toilet bowl in the final few minutes against Virginia, but I nailed a lead on the road with about 10 minutes remaining. They went on the road against South Florida as well, so this team has been able to give you much more recently. Are they going to lose battle on the boards? Yes, you've got a Mississippi State team that's one of the best teams in the country with regards to their rebound percentage. Having a pair of guys in Charles Matthews and Keyshawn Murphy were able to combine for 15 rebounds per game. Michael DeWolko, who comes in from Miami, he's been able to give you a block, 5.5 boards per contest. And this is a Mississippi State team that has much improved with their three-point shooting about 34.5% from 3. Just 2 seasons ago, they were dead last in the country with this regard. And Mississippi State, a top 40 team in the country, in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Joshua Hubbard has been your main headline scorer with about 17.5 points per game, but Reggie Ward is able to give you about 7.5 rebounds per game for Bethune-Cookman. Cookman not generating the same amount of turnovers as they did a season ago, but you got each of your top 3 scorers, Ward, along with Freeman and Trey Thomas, who's been able to supply 13-plus points per contest. These 3 guys, I'll give you at least 1.4 steals per game. They've been doing all this with G&I Hunt, who is a part of that Oregon State team that made the Elite Eight, being out since Thanksgiving, so they've been able to find a way with that regard. Jesus Calero is able to give you a steal and a half, is able to be a relatively good glue guy on the defensive side of things as well. So I do think that Bethune-Cookman going to be able to hold in there. Bethune-Cookman by no means is any sort of a up-tempo, really dynamo team, and this is a Mississippi State team that they are a top 40 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but I do think that Bethune-Cookman going to be able to hold up at the point of attack. Going to be tough for them down low, but I like the way that they have been able to guard the perimeter, so I did set my total at 140.5 in on the under end. With regards to right up, I'm taking those points with Cookman, set them as a 24.5 point dog. 306-593, 306-594. Southern is on the road against Nebraska. Nebraska is a favorite of 21 to 21.5 points. 141 is the total, and set my line at 18.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Southern. It's been a little bit of an up and down season for Southern, but they've been able to have some triumphs in non-conference play as they were able to go on the road. They were able to knock off Tulsa, coming off of a less than tremendous effort against USC. And make no mistake about it, this is a Southern team that they're looking to get out there and they're looking to play a little bit more up-tempo as well as Nebraska. Nebraska held down a little bit in that Diamond Head Classic. That's more or less because they were playing against a bunch of slower teams. Prior to that Diamond Head Classic, they were a top 95 team in terms of total possessions per game, right around where Southern is. Southern is 87th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so I did set my total here at a 144.5, and for Southern, it's been the whole being greater than the sum of its parts. They were dealing with an injury to their main point guard in Tijani Dumasi. He should be back in the lineup in this one after he missed that game against USC, though we shall see on that front. 9 points, 5 assists, steal and a half per contest for the team, but Van Michael Jacobs step up in a big way. Good versatility with 10.5 points, a little bit over a steal, 3 assists per contest. Southern is not going to have that one guy that's really going to hit the boards hard for you, but you've got 4 separate guys that give you at least 4 rebounds per game for Southern. This has been one of the better turnover teams in all of college basketball. Really, both of these teams have been able to do a nice job of being able to generate steals. Both of these teams do rank in terms of turnovers forced on the per possession basis in the top 50 nationally. For Connor season, it's been a little bit up and down this season, but feels like he's starting to find it as he's been able to slide this team with about 11.5 points per game, and he's shooting 43% from 3-point, but you just don't know what you're going to be able to get out of him night in and night out. Over the last 5 games, he has scored 1, 13, 15, 2, and 7 points. So that's a bit of an issue. Bryce Williams, he's been that main concept for this team, averaging just under 20 points per contest on 43% 3-point shooting. You've been able to have down low Berkey Butusel, hopefully I said that correctly, giving you about 6.5 rebounds per game, has come in from UCLA. He's been able to give this team a little bit of rough and tumble, and for Braxton Mayo, at 7 feet tall, he's able able to do a nice job guarding the rim. Doesn't see a ton of minutes, but he's able to give you about 3.5, 4 boards per contest. That should throw a monkey wrench into what Southern is looking to do, but I do think that for Nebraska, team that is only shooting about 32% or so from three-point range, that's going to be a little bit of an issue. They've been held down offensively to fewer than 70 points in 3 of their last 5 games. Southern, I think, is going to be able to generate some turnovers. I think that this is a sloppier game, but I do think that this is a more up-tempo game. So my total 144.5 in on the over and in on the points with Southern, and we wrap things up with 6.595 to 6.596. Seattle is playing host to Nichols. Nichols, an 8.5 to a 9-point dog. Totals between 146.5 to a 147. Did set this line at 7.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Nichols. Now it's big that Matthew Alexander Moncrief is going to be back for the Seattle team. Right now averaging about 14 to 15 points, 10 plus rebounds per game. Without him, this Seattle team was just lost in the wilderness. They were without him for their 3 games prior to that win over Washington. They knocked off a non-D1 team, and they lost against Western Kentucky and UIC, Illinois, Chicago by double figures in both of those games before being able to put up 79 on Washington. You've been able to get some good production on Blake Arrington in the backcourt to be able to help as well. He's the main facilitator. 9.5 points, 5 assists, comes in from Idaho State. Not really going to pop it from three-point range, but also defensively does give you about 2 steals per game, and that's big because Seattle typically is a top 75 team with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis. This season, they've been outside the top 150 with that regard. They go up against a Nichols team that has really neither been here nor there. They're not really doing one thing amazing, but they're really not doing one thing terrible as well, and they're about 120th with regards to total possessions per game as well. So, I mean, this is very much a team that is a bit of a floater and a chameleon. They do need to find some offensive production, though. They're outside the top 3 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. You've been able to get a little bit out of Rob Brown along with Byron Ireland, who have been able to combine for just under 25 points per game, but team is only shooting about 30.5% from three-point range. They've been dealing with a few injuries. Ike Cornish has been in and out of the lineup for that backcourt all season long. Down low, Brian Miles was supposed to be the main rebounder for the team. He's been out since Thanksgiving, so a little bit of an issue there. As a result, you've had Mekhi Collins be able to come in, give the team about 6.5 rebounds per game. That's helped them out down low, and with Seattle getting back Moncrief, that should be able to help them out quite a bit with that regard. But this is also a Nichols team that in the past, they've always been a really good turnover team. Last year, they weren't able to generate as many of those turnovers, but this year, that has really been back in full force. It feels like they've been really embracing that quite a bit more, and I do think that that's going to be able to keep them lively in a game against a Seattle team that is turning the ball over a little bit north of 12 times per contest for Nichols. In terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, this has always been a team that's been pretty rock solid with that regard. They've slipped outside the top 250, but every single turnover that they force is pretty much a live ball turnover, which I find to be very fascinating, and this has been a Nichols team that when they've been on the road, they've been able to do a relatively solid job of being able to hold up defensively. The team is within the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis with the Seattle team. They've been hit or miss, to say the least, on the glass. Losing guys like Brandon Sharpfield and company have really been hurting them, as outside of Matthew Moncrief, you've only got one other player that gives you north of 3.5 rebounds per game. It's a Seattle unit that is currently, though, 119th with regards to that in terms of their rebound rate. They've been doing the whole square than some of its parts approach, and then for Nichols, find themselves on the road inside the top 200 with regards to rebound rate. Should be just enough to be able to keep themselves lively in this game. I did set my line at 7.5, so going to be willing to take the A+ here with Nichols, and I'm going to be in on this total under, as I did set my total at 145.5, and that'll wrap things up for the Monday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family podcast. Big thanks to Rob Donaldson, who does great work with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets, for joining me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at unit_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Coming at you guys every single day on this podcast, which means I am back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.